And we are back. Welcome to my preview and predictions for day 3 of the last 16 in the Club World Cup after the most incredible and bizarre day of football we have seen in a long, long while. Firstly, England's Young Lions winning the Under-21 European Championship, despite me thinking they had very little chance. An unbelievable performance from Lee Carsley's men to secure back-to-back Under-21 championships. And then the absolute farce that was the Benfica-Chelsea game. I had to go to bed. I was exhausted, I was knackered, I went to bed because the game was stopped with 3 minutes left due to adverse weather conditions and the players did not come back out for 2 hours. And then in those final 3 minutes, Benfica get a penalty, equalise, and it goes to extra time and Chelsea win 4-1. But because of the 2 hour break, everyone's got fresh legs again. Absolute farce. I don't know what the Americans need to do to figure out how this is going to be stopped, because this has happened on multiple occasions throughout this Club World Cup so far, and this is a test run for the actual International World Cup next summer. And I'm telling you now, if there are multiple delays in the actual World Cup, people are not going to be happy. I know a lot of people don't care for this tournament. I obviously do, and I am frustrated as a football fan that I didn't get to see the end of that Chelsea game. And it's going to be way, way worse if this keeps happening next summer. So, I mean, leave your suggestions in the comments. What would you do to sort all of that out? But what it did mean, of course, is Chelsea did progress to the next round, along with Palmeiras after their victory in the opening game of the last 16. And what that means is, as we go ahead to the prediction screen for today, that I am now on 30 out of 50, because I did predict that Palmeiras would progress. I did do a draw in 90 minutes as well, so however which way you want to take that, we can take it that way, but obviously I did do Benfica. So 30 out of 50, 2 correct scores so far. So before we get into it, if you haven't done so already, please do consider dropping a like on this video. Share it with a friend if you enjoy all of my prediction series and want to get more people involved. Subscribe to the channel with notifications turned on so don't miss out on any of the remaining previews and predictions ahead of the remainder of this Club World Cup and the start of the Women's Euros next week. And if you want to become a member of this channel to support the channel even more and gain access to additional perks for this channel, you can do so by hitting the join button at the bottom of your screen right now. And now, without any further ado, let's get straight into it. We start things off with Inter Milan taking on Fluminense, the Italians of Europe taking on the Brazilians of South America. It's another opportunity for the Brazilians to show themselves up against another one of the big European sides. And to be honest, coming into this game, neither of these sides have particularly been that convincing. I think what you could say about Inter Milan is they've got progressively better game on game, drawing, then winning 2-1, then winning 2-0. For Fluminense, you'd probably say they have done the exact job that they've needed to do to get through, drawing 0-0 with Borussia Dortmund, setting out their defensive store wall and keeping them at bay. Then when they need to beat Ulsan, being very aggressive, scoring 4, but obviously conceding 2. And then going into the final game against Mamelodi, again, knowing that they needed to just get that draw to progress to the next round. They set up their defence once again and got the 0-0 draw to progress. So it's an interesting dynamic coming into this game because, like I said, I think both sides could offer a little bit more coming into it. But at the same time, I think both sides are doing enough to progress. So the question you've got to ask yourself is, what is it going to take to separate these two sides? And potentially that is what you would say comes down to the all-important team news. Now, for Inter Milan, the big news for them, of course, was Denzel Dumfries coming back into the starting lineup for that River Plate game, and he did make an immediate impact. Obviously not actually contributing, but he was much more effective in those outside areas than the players they had been playing in that position prior to it. But unfortunately for them, it does look like that Marcus Thuram is still not going to be able to make it for this one. And considering that Taremi's not there, Arnautovic has been released, and Thuram is now injured, there is still going to be a much more of a reliance on young Esposito, who, to be fair to him, has been fantastic for Inter Milan in this tournament so far. So big pressure on him to deliver once again against what is a very, very solid defence. For Fluminense, the big question mark is around their former AC Milan player, which is, of course, Thiago Silva. He missed match day 3 with a muscular injury and remains a doubt to take on his former rivals coming into this one. Obviously, he is the captain. He is the marshaller of that defence. They didn't need him in the game against Mamelodi, but he was a massive factor in that 0-0 with Borussia Dortmund. So, realistically, the question is, can Fluminense keep Inter Milan out? And to be honest, what is the actual game plan for Fluminense here? Because at some point, they're going to have to go for it, unless their plan is to try and hold Inter to a 0-0 draw and then look for penalties. Obviously, I think the outlay is going to be try and keep Inter Milan out and then hit them on counters and see if they can break them down. But honestly, with how solid Inter Milan's defence can be at times, I think that's going to be a real tough ask for Fluminense. What you would say, though, is even though I do think Inter Milan have looked better game in, game out in this tournament so far, they did need River Plate to go down to 10 men before they ended up getting those 2 goals. So I think this has a real potential to go the distance. I do think that Fluminense are more than capable of at least taking this game to extra time, if not all the way to penalties. But I do still think with the extra quality that Inter Milan have, they should end up being on the winning side in this match. I think, like I say, we've had 2 games in the opening 2 matches, both of them going to extra time already. So it would not surprise me to see a third Brazilian side hold their opposition to a goalless draw going into the extra time period. But I am going to go for Inter Milan to just edge it. I think they've got enough attacking quality to pull it off. I think Barella's looked great the last couple of games. Obviously, Martinez has been brilliant throughout. I'm going to go for a 1-0 victory to Inter Milan, but that is no disrespect to Fluminense. They're more than capable of getting the result here. I do think this is a genuinely tough pick to call. The second game in the group, I'm not so convinced is going to be as close as the previous one, because in my opinion, Manchester City have been by far the standout team of this Club World Cup so far. They look absolutely relentless right now. That performance against Juventus is a frightening one for both the entirety of this competition and for myself as a Manchester United fan going into the new season. It is worrying how good City look right now. And yes, they're going to have a break before the Premiership, but they look well up for this tournament. They are playing some fantastic stuff. And I think Al Hilal are going to be in for a genuine shock as to what they're coming up against in this one. That said, Al Hilal have been more than worth their position in this group, in this knockout stages so far. A draw against Real Madrid, where I said on multiple occasions I think they were the better side and were unlucky not to beat Real Madrid. But then not that convincing against Salzburg. And yes, they did beat Pachuca, but didn't necessarily play that well in that one either, giving up an awful lot of chances in that game. And I think you give those sort of chances to Manchester City, and they're going to be on the receiving end of some big goals conceded. That said, coming into this game, Al Hilal have actually only conceded 1 goal in this competition so far, and it was that shot where Gonzalez scuffed it onto his own body and it fumbled in from Real Madrid. So in terms of the defensive outlay, they've actually been really, really good. But you look at Manchester City, they beat Vidad quite comfortably. They destroyed Al Ain. They destroyed Juventus. And yes, it's going to be a tough one for Al Hilal, but I just don't think they're going to have enough to keep Manchester City at bay. What you would say is, in terms of the team news, it is basically night and day in terms of what you'd expect to see from these two sides. For Al Hilal, you could pretty much name their starting 11. It's been the same starting 11, I think, in all 3 matches so far, so you know what you're going to get from them. And it's just going to be a question of, is it going to be enough? They're obviously going to have João Cancelo coming up against his former employers. You're going to have former Premier League players like Ruben Neves and Koulibaly in there. And like I say, you know exactly what sort of team you're going to be getting from Al Hilal. Whereas for Manchester City, the only guarantees that you do have is that Rico Lewis is suspended and that Echeverry is now injured and he is set to miss the rest of the tournament. Other than that, it's a free-for-all for who is actually going to make the Manchester City starting lineup. But the problem is that every team in this tournament, it doesn't matter what 11 Pep puts out, the quality on the pitch is at exactly the same level. And I think that is why they're doing so well in this competition. Everyone else is either starting to get players tired from the heat and the matches piling up, or they're having to rotate players around and the quality of the side drops due to the rotations. Whereas Manchester City can keep rotating that team and keep playing at the absolute highest level. And unfortunately, I think that is going to prove to be the difference in this match. Like I said, Al Hilal have looked very good defensively in this tournament. Manchester City have looked vulnerable defensively in this tournament. Let's not forget, it was 5-2. Juventus still scored 2 goals the other way. But I look at the quality in that Manchester City attack, and I think it's going to be too much for Al Hilal. At the end of the day, I think Manchester City are going to take it. I'm going to go for 3-1. I think there is more than enough chance that we see more goals at both ends. It wouldn't surprise me to see another 5-2 like we had against Juventus, or like a 4-3 or something like that. But at the end of the day, I still think City are going to end up on top in this one. Do Al Hilal have a chance? Absolutely. If they play it right, they time when they actually go forward, they keep their defensive shape tight, they could potentially spring an upset. But I just don't see them keeping that Manchester City attack out. So that is why I'm going for them. As always, let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. I think it's going to be another pair of fascinating matches. Let me know what you think is going to happen in these ones. Don't forget to check out my video from yesterday covering today's matches as well. Thank you very much for watching as always. I'll be back tomorrow morning with the final 2 matches of the last 16 to preview and predict. So I'll see you there.